Okay, Lucas Wotawa here. Here is my audience. 1, 2, 3. Thank you guys. Tripod. That should be tall enough. Informative speech. In 1991, a heavy metal band named Metallica was taking the world by storm during a global concert tour in the release of their 5th studio album. The headbanging quartet was backlined by drummer Lars Ulrich, commanding from his iconic white Tama brand drum set, showing off 2 bass drums. In a 2021 news article for Billboard 200, Keith Caulfield indicates that Metallica's self-titled album ranks as the best-selling US album of all time, with over 17.3 million units sold, according to Nielsen SoundScan report, appearing in Billboard Top 10 in the 30th anniversary of the album's initial release. But get this, prior to the 1900s, the concept of the drum set was non-existent, and for many, the idea of one person playing multiple percussion instruments simultaneously was a stretch of the imagination. At the end of my speech, my audience will recognize double bass drumming as the standard of drum set progression. You will learn this when I explain the development of percussion accessory hardware, the shift from concert percussion ensembles to one-person drum set performers, and the unique style and ability of double bass drummers. Now, when I say hardware, I'm talking about the clamps, stands, and foot pedals that drummers use to reach and mount all of their instruments. In the late 19th century, individual percussion instruments were played each by one person in an orchestra ensemble. The bass drum, for example, was played with handheld mallets. And nowadays, this is the large drum on the floor of a drum set, played with a foot pedal, often called a kick drum. Bass drum foot pedals allowed one drummer to play patterns with their foot while also performing with their hands. A drummer who could play like this was called a double drummer. They were more likely to be hired as they could do the labor of multiple percussionists. In the book Kick It, A Social History of the Drum Kit, 2020, Matt Brennan writes, "It is not until the 1880s that we find evidence of bass drum pedals appearing in the United States, and it coincides with the appearance of classified advertisements listing double drumming among the skills a drummer should possess." Advancements in the manufacturing of foot pedals and mounting hardware meant a larger drum set to play on from one seat. Now that you see how accessory percussion hardware manufacturing developed over time, I'm going to tell you how bands downsized to having one percussionist perform the duties of an entire percussion group. New explorations in drum set possibilities gave rise to unprecedented double bass drum possibilities. Double drumming became trap drumming, which was a term for 3 or more percussion items on the drum set. And this grew to be the norm for working drummers. With the hardware that allowed a drummer to reach all of the instruments with ease, drummers began crafting layers of rhythm with each limb independence and limb interdependence becoming the focus of study for the modern drummer. Louis Bellson was the first drummer to use 2 bass drums in 1946. He was a jazz band leader, contemporary to the perhaps more famous Buddy Rich, who used single bass. Matt Brennan also writes in Kick It, A Social History of the Drum Set in 2020, quote, "Technological innovations in drum hardware have contributed to shifting the technical possibilities of the instrument. Drummers continue to push the limits of new drum kit technologies as soon as they arrive. The proliferation of the double bass drum pedal in heavy metal and consequent rising expectations in foot virtuosity is an example of this." Stick Drummer magazine published on their website in 2006 the account of how one such double bass virtuoso's journey began. Pete Sandoval had never used double bass drums before joining Morbid Angel in 1988. He practiced day and night to get his footwork up to speed and amazingly recorded the first album within a couple months of joining. Pete's songs feature long passages of machine gun speed double bass drum rolls held for sustained periods of time that makes up the bulk of his work as a musician. Now that I've explained how the rise of one drummer bands continue to double bass drum virtuosity have contributed to double bass drum virtuosity, I'm going to describe some differing viewpoints about the use of double bass drumming in modern music in shaping a unique style brought by a drummer. So the pattern played with double bass drums mimics the ability of the hands to use one stick in each hand hitting the same drum in the middle, right, left, or whatever pattern you can imagine. If a bass drum only has one foot pedal, you can only play patterns with one limb, but two bass drums allows you to play the pattern symmetrically with the right and the left foot. So the objective of a double bass drum or a twin pedal is about symmetrical playability. Is it practical? Is it musical? Is it necessary? These are topics for debate among music critics and working drummers alike. Does double bass imply faster the better? Maybe yes for WFD contestants, also known as the world's fastest drumming federation, but speed is not a necessary component for all double bass players. Nick Mason of Pink Floyd in 1972 video Live at Pompeii displays a two bass drum set. If you've ever heard Pink Floyd, you know how gentle and calming their music is. Many drummers choose single bass as a preservation of tradition, calling double bass flashy, grandiose. Although the Encyclopedia of Double Bass Drumming in 2000, which is a music instruction textbook by Modern Drummer Publications Incorporated, explains, quote, double bass should enhance an already complete drummer. It should not be a substitute for a weak single foot. Don't play double bass drums just because they are there. Play them only when their inclusion adds something meaningful to the music. So now I've told you in a brief history of drum set performance how double bass drumming is today's standard of drum set progression. I did this by explaining the development of percussion accessory hardware, downsizing of ensembles to one drum set performing band leaders, and the unique style and ability of double bass drummers. So consider the developments of the last 50 years and imagine as some drummers preserve traditional jazz methods while others embrace change and brave new paths in decades ahead, and how we may behold or dance or bob our heads to entirely new styles of music still yet to be conceived. Thank you. I hope I didn't walk out of the frame on that. Okay. Audience, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's a wrap.